Welcome back, everyone. I am coming to you guys today, another solo episode, and I want to reframe this idea of reparenting. And it comes up a lot because I talk about it a lot in my coaching sessions with clients. Also, in addition to parent coaching, I do have life coaching clients whose work primarily focuses on really not reparenting, but changing patterns and recognizing the areas where we stay stuck or where we're blocked and how to move through some of those things by ultimately cultivating our own inner parent. And that's what I want to touch on today is this idea of like taking the notion of reparenting and really applying a little bit of a different framework to it. So, and I'm going to unpack this in the context of parenting, but also like what it means in terms of how we live our lives and things like that. So, initially, when somebody had asked me, and this was years ago, or when I had learned, I guess, about the idea of reparenting and how people wanted to kind of be able to go back and maybe redo or fix some of the things that they felt might have gone wrong in their childhood, or reflect on those things or repair those things, which, by the way, I think is a really reasonable and fair thing to do. This term of like reparenting sort of kept coming up and kept being explored. And this is my one little sort of qualm with reparenting, I guess, in terms of just like the phrasing, is I think it often implies like we want to redo. And I want to be really clear. Everyone's situation is going to be very different. So there are some people where this is important that if you had a very traumatic upbringing, or if your childhood was, one with violence and things of that nature, I am not here to sort of give medical advice, but that's going to feel very different. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, no, I actually did need a redo, I think obviously with the support of a medical team and therapists, like, I understand that desire. But I'm talking more generally speaking, like all of us experience things in childhood that now as adults we know differently, right? And I can even look at my own mom and dad, who I have had really wonderful parents and had a wonderful childhood. But at the same time, like we talk about it a lot with my mom in particular, and she'll say, like, we did what we knew at the time, and we have to give a lot of grace for that, and we have to have a lot of space for that. So nobody is going to ever parent their kids perfectly. I did not parent my kids perfectly, and I still don't. I mean, things come up. You naturally are learning through that parenting process. So the idea isn't really, for me at least, for everybody to say, I want to redo. I wish I had a completely different childhood. I think most of us probably wouldn't feel that way, particularly if you've done the inner work and a little bit of that, self-help, if you will, kind of work. I think what we start to find is like by design, we had the childhood we were supposed to have so that we can then embark on the adulthood or the adult life that we are meant to have and how we're supposed to serve. And again, that doesn't mean that you deserved anything bad that may have happened to you. It's just that everything that happens to us is happening for us. And if we can see it that way, we can always utilize these moments, even the hard ones, as catalysts for change, transformation, healing. And then how do we take that and then impart that on somebody else or on others so that there's this sort of collective shift that can happen. So again, like I said, my childhood was a very sort of happy, joyful one. I felt very loved and supported and all those things. But nonetheless, because I was raised by two human beings, you're naturally going to have moments where everybody does it wrong. I think if I had my own kids who are now adults on the podcast, they would say the same thing of me and my husband. So the idea isn't like to blame, I would say. And that's where I think a little bit of reparenting can get stuck in like sort of a victim complex, is that we sit and blame. And if you had only treated me like this, and if you had only provided me this, and if you had only done this, I wouldn't be this way. And so that's a little bit of what I want to reframe for us today. So to me, when I'm working with clients on things that maybe continue to come up, patterns that they keep repeating, it's not really about needing to reparent. To me, it's really about cultivating your own inner parent. So I think what happens is, and I'll speak to this through the lens of parents or parenting, but once you become a parent, I think the notion is that you should have all the answers. You should know what to do. A good parent knows how to provide X, Y, and Z for their kids. And if you don't do those things, then you're not a good parent. Like, I think those are the stories we tell ourselves. So in that framework, like if we subconsciously believe that, what starts to happen is if our kids don't do the things we're expecting them to do based on that formula that I just described or that framework, it pushes against the story that we're, gosh, you're not doing a very good job as a parent. And so I think one is understanding and going back into our own childhood and understanding that our parents were humans doing the best that they could at the time with what they knew. Now that's going to be different for everybody, and some people are more evolved. Some parents might have been more emotionally immature. Some parents might have been in circumstances that made it very difficult for them to provide a loving, safe environment. Everybody's situation is very different, so I say this with complete love and not judgment at all. But the idea is that when we're thinking about what it means to be a parent, we always have a story assigned to that. And so whatever that story is or what you believe it means to be a good parent, you are naturally going to find yourself in conflict at some point when something happens that does not match or affirm that story. So the problem with that is by design, you will be sent a child who will disrupt or try to disrupt some of that story. And in doing so, it will force you to look back and reflect a little bit on why you're holding on to certain stories and where and how you still need to continue to heal. Because if I have the mindset that I'm now a parent, I should know what to do, I should have all the answers, I should be equipped, I'm the one who is leading the child, which is true, then essentially when something goes wrong, we assume it's a failure. And so we leave very little room for inner parenting. We leave very little room for continuing to grow alongside our child. We leave very little room for us to look at a situation and go, okay, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. What is this here to teach me? Because relationships are ultimately our greatest teachers. And the one you have with your child is, to me, one of the most intimate and deeply revealing relationships as well. So when we adopt that framework that we should know everything, when something goes wrong, we will naturally feel bothered, and we will not take the time to go, what is that poking on? What is that touching, right? What is that getting at? What story is underneath there? Why did that bother me so much? So the idea of reparenting for me should really, what we want to think about is not a redo, but how do I essentially carry the baton, right? I was parented and I'm still parented. I have a child, so now I myself, I'm also a parent. So who's parenting me at that point is sort of the question. And for me, I think the question or the answer to that is we have to really cultivate our own inner parent. And what that is at least in the framework that I use, is like, how do we love ourselves so unconditionally in the same way we would love our child? How do we support ourselves through hard moments, through mistakes, through disappointment in the same way we would support a child? How can we express that same degree of compassion that we do to others as a form of self-compassion? Because that's how I see inner parenting, and that's what I believe it means to parent, right? To just love without condition, to love without expectation, to show up fully and honestly and transparently, to know that parenting is a transformative process where we continue to learn, heal, grow, evolve, change, strengthen, right? Empower ourselves. So if we can adopt that as the framework, well, then our own inner parent becomes a much easier sort of essence to tap into. And so instead of looking at what was done to us and feeling very upset about that, which is fair. Again, I'm not trying to not validate how somebody is feeling or what their experience might have been. At one point, we have to find a way through it, right? We can't just stay there. Otherwise, we'll continue to miss the mark with our kids. So let me unpack this with a few examples. So I was working with a client, and I've shared this, I think, on Substack, but she was sharing with me that she has a 6-year-old daughter, and she really, really, really wants her daughter to know that she's just always, always there for her. And she had described that relationship or that need for her daughter to know she's always there for her exactly that way, like in those words. And I just really want her to know. I just really want her to know I'm just always here for her. I'm always her safe place. I'm always her person. I'm going to love and adore her always. I'm her number one fan. And again, all really beautiful sentiments and things. And so what was coming up a lot was that she wanted her daughter to feel this way because it was a direct result of her own upbringing where she felt very neglected, very unseen. And again, it wasn't by any means like an abusive relationship, not neglect in that way, but just she just sort of felt like ignored, seen and not heard, like, or not seen, not heard, all of those things. And she felt like she just had parents who were very kind of cold to some extent, disciplined in the sense of do as I say and don't ask questions, like a very kind of abrupt upbringing in that way, where she just felt very stifled and just didn't ever feel appreciated or adored just for who she was, and felt like everything had to then be performative. The better she behaved, the more she was sort of approved of or safe, And so as a result now, because of this sense of feeling like she was really never fully seen and somewhat neglected and not really showered with attention and love in the way that she had hoped, she's now a parent and she's almost over giving to her daughter. And so that pendulum now swings in the complete other direction. And this is what I mean, that by design, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, will send you a child who is meant to help you learn and expose where you continue to need healing. And so she has a daughter who is fiercely independent, very free-spirited, loves a challenge, doesn't want to be sort of constantly attended to. And that's very hard for this mom. And so the more the mom continues to give her this, the more the daughter is resistant, right? Don't tell me how to do it. You don't mean it when you say that. There's constant pushback, like for everything. And so this mom is really left going, what's going on? Because I desperately needed that as a child. And here I am giving it to you and you don't want it and you don't care and you're going to be ungrateful. And so now even in me saying this and you listening, you can probably hear where I'm going to go with this, which is often we're parenting the child inside of us, not the child in front of us. So that couldn't be more true for this mom. She was trying to sort of serve this need that her inner child had by giving it to her daughter, who essentially didn't need that exact same thing. And as a result, this mother kept missing the mark and going, well, what's the problem here? I'm giving you something that's so beautiful and necessary and something I would have killed for, and you don't even care. You're not even impacted or grateful. And so the mom's response to the daughter resisting was, again, a form of like, I'm not enough. I'm not doing it right. I'm not. And so you can almost see in these relationships, her mom and dad to her, and then this parent with her daughter was like mirroring the same thing to some degree, which is that you're not doing a good enough job, right? This is the takeaway the mom essentially has when her actions or her efforts are not being received in the way that she's expecting. And so I said to this mom, because it's something that you needed, it doesn't necessarily mean that your daughter needs it in the exact same way, right? We all need love and attention, but it varies and it can be expressed in a number of different ways. So what this child really needed was she needed a parent who could really sit in sort of the discomfort that comes with having to set a boundary when a child is a little more independent, right? So when we have a fiercely independent child whose brain is still developing, they naturally are going to be the child that takes much longer to learn things like cause and effect. So if I'm parenting a child who's fiercely independent, free-spirited, really kind of the one that you're like, oh my goodness, you know what I'm talking about. There's like energy for days and things of that sort. By design, what you should be telling yourself is part of my job is going to be how do I harness all that beautiful energy for her and have her use it in a productive, healthy way where she continues to stay safe because her brain is still developing. She does not have the cause and effect to understand how to manage all of this power, all of this energy. So she didn't need a lot of compliments and love and attention and affirmations and things like that. That wasn't the need. She needed a parent to go, whoa, okay, here's the line. I see where you're going. I see you. I value you. I love this. But this can't happen beyond this line. Here's the boundary, right? And that parent couldn't do that because what resulted was the child would grow upset every time a boundary was set. And the parent would assume that because there wasn't agreement, boundary setting, and the child should just say, okay. And because the child wasn't happy, the parent was then saying, well, they're not happy. So clearly that's a reflection of me. My job is to make them happy, right? Give attention, love, keep them happy, let them know I'm their biggest fan, right? Go back to that way I was describing this mom at the top of the podcast. And you'll start to understand that she's going to continue to miss the mark, because then what she does is she adjusts her boundary. She tiptoes around her child's big emotions. She doesn't know how to even affirm the big emotions, because she assumes that sadness, anger, being mad is a direct reflection of poor parenting, and a happy child means a good parent. And so because she had a lot of sadness growing up, and that sadness was never really affirmed or recognized or even acknowledged, in her world, when she sees her child as sad, she's assuming, wow, I'm doing all the right things and you're still sad, so clearly I'm not doing the right. I'm the bad one here. Something's wrong with me. I'm sort of the one coming at this with some form of a deficiency. And so again, because there was this story underneath all of it, which is a good parent, A, has a happy kid, and B, is constantly showering their child with love and attention and devotion and all those things. And again, yes, that's a true statement. But we'll miss the mark if that becomes out of balance. Meaning, if we're not paying attention to what our child needs, and our entire aim is to heal the inner child inside of us who desperately needed all that attention and wanted that attention, we will continue to give it to a child who's saying, I actually don't really need that. It's not really why I'm here for you. Why I'm here is because I need to learn how to be in this world with all this energy, all this power, all these big emotions. Give me the skills that I need so I know how to manage it and I can walk through this. And so when we shifted this for her and she was able to understand that she needed to sort of be that steady person for her child, and that she needed to simultaneously cultivate her own inner parent that attended to her and loved her in hard moments. So this is what it looked like. So now she sets the boundary with her child, and let's say it's like, you can't have more time doing this activity even though I know you love it. And the child gets very mad, right? And in the past, she would have adjusted the boundary and said something like, fine, 5 more minutes, but don't ask again. You know what you're supposed to do. And then the child would get upset, and then she would try to soften it. I know you're upset. I'm really sorry you're upset. I wish I didn't have to take the toy away, but I just, what should we do? Should we just hold on to the toy? You tell me why you're sad. Talk to me, use your words. And so you can see, right, the desire, the anxiousness underneath her child being upset was like saying to her, you're not doing a good job. You're not doing a good job. You got to attend more, love more, give more. That's what she's needing. No one gave it to you. And so instead we started to change that narrative, and we started to say things like, when her child got upset, it was like, how do I mirror back for my child in this moment and just say, I know you're bummed. I know it's really hard. I know it's really hard when you can't get what you want. I know, I get that feeling. And how can we just stay steady and in that moment say to ourselves, I am safe when she's unhappy. I'm a good parent when I can set and hold a boundary with love. My job is to stay steady and anchored. My job isn't to make the adjustment. My job is to show my daughter how she can be this emotionally resilient child by teaching her that she can move through hard emotions. She doesn't rattle me or upset me. I can stay steady because I trust and believe that she can get through it. So the more we can inner parent ourselves in that moment, doesn't require reparenting. We can't change our parents. We can't change what's happened in the past. So instead, how do we treat ourselves with more compassion, more grace, more love, right? And so now, instead of falling into that pattern of, I have to fix this because this story is so unbearable and I can't really tolerate sitting in this discomfort, then she starts to say, I am loving my daughter. And in setting this boundary and holding this boundary, I am attending to her needs, right? Love and attention is wonderful when we're just playing and cuddling and all the wonderful things of what it means to parent. But man, we always seem to forget that connection and love and attention is also when we're sitting with them in the middle of a hard moment, when we're not budging or adjusting the boundary just because they're struggling. And instead we're saying, yep, this is going to be really hard. And also, my gosh, you're going to be able to get through it. And the more you get through it, the more you're going to be able to tolerate, and the more you're going to be able to do, and the stronger you're going to become. And wow, look out world. I cannot wait to see what you get to do with all that. So in a nutshell, you want to always ask yourself that question. Am I parenting the child in front of me, or am I parenting the child inside of me? And it's a good question to ask because it allows us the space to abandon and let go of the story that if I have to have all the answers, I have to be doing everything right. A happy child means a happy, good parent. Like, we don't want to tether our emotional state to our child's behaviors and choices, it's a very unfair burden to place on them. So that is sort of where I would tell you to start in terms of like examples of what it looks like for the reparenting piece. Another example of inner parenting that looks a little bit different. So this is when a parent might fall back on patterns that are they just know they don't want to do. So examples of this would be yelling, overreacting, threatening, punishments, leveraging shame, leveraging fear in order to get our child to acquiesce or basically do the behavior we want them to do. And so a lot of those are patterned because we learned them growing up, meaning maybe you cried. Let's use an example of a dad and a man. And you cried as a little boy and your father or mother said to you, don't act like a little baby. Boy, you don't cry like that. What are you doing? Nobody's going to want to play with you, right? There are parents, a lot of parents till this day will say things like that to their kids. Nobody's going to play with you if you act like that, right? And so that would be in the category of leveraging shame, right? We're trying to shame them into acting right. And again, I'm not saying a consequence isn't needed. I'm not saying to just lay over and let them act however they want. I'm just saying don't fall into that default pattern of leveraging shame. So in that instance, we want to cultivate our own inner parent that says, I am safe to do it differently. Because see, what happens is when your child becomes disruptive or engages in a behavior that you don't want them to, you will naturally have a nervous system response in your body, right? Those are your fight, flight, freeze responses. And there are more, but those are the three most common. So it elicits that response. And when that response is elicited, it's so quick and automatic. What happens is the brain will say to us, choose familiar, it feels safe, choose familiar, it's in the known, we like it. So even if we don't agree with it, we will default to a familiar pattern. And this is where how we were parented will play a very strong role in the way we parent. So then our default mode becomes, oh my gosh, I gotta shame this kid. What is he doing? No one's gonna like him. He's not safe. He's not safe right now. I gotta stop this. And so we naturally default to a pattern that was done to us. And so we grab for that because we feel very unsafe in that moment underneath the chaos of whatever it is. And so instead, if you can inner parent yourself, you got to build a really brief pause in there. That's why I teach the PAR process, that pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. And you're going to just pause and you're going to go, every part of me wants to choose my patterning, my old patterning, yelling, threatening, shaming, fear, using fear, whatever the pattern was. But I'm just not this time. I'm just not. And instead, I'm going to think about what does my child need in this moment? And maybe they just need to feel sad because I just set a boundary that they don't like. And maybe it's on me to just hold that boundary. And what I am going to do is, because I want to teach them how to self-regulate, I'm going to say we can't do anything else. Like, we're not going to play. We're not going to pull out another toy. We're not going outside. We're not going to turn on the TV. We're not grabbing for a snack. We're not doing anything else until they can calm down for a full minute. And that's what, like, I teach this in coaching. It's called a break or a reset. Joe Newman talks about it in his book, Raising Lions. But you want the aim to be getting them to self-regulate, not getting them to behave well, right? So if we can see it that way, you will naturally shift your perspective. You will shift your perspective so that it's meeting your child's needs and it is not defaulting to your own patterning. And as a result, your inner parent starts to say, you're safe, you don't have to use those tools. You're safe to parent differently. You're safe to use something that's not familiar. You're safe to break these cycles. You're safe to change the pattern. Because that's what it is in that moment. It's just a simple shift in fight, flight, or freeze. So this is true in life too. This comes up a lot with coaching clients that are just here for inner parenting work. And so if somebody says to me, I'm really excited about this thing that I'm doing, let's say it's a creative endeavor, but I'm terrified about this and that, and I'm really trying to optimize for like the best results. So I want to make sure the audience is like this, and this is happening, and that's in place, and this is in place. So when we start to default to what I call your controller part, right, and we're familiar with like IFS work, we'll know this, but like you have protective parts and different things, but essentially somewhere along the way you learned that you have to control everything outside of you to feel safe. And so when that becomes the default pattern, how are we shifting that? Because we all know there's no such thing as certainty. It's just a fallacy. We can do the best we can to control for certain variables, but there has to be a point of surrender. There has to be a point of letting go and just saying, I've got to trust myself in this process. So this is what I would leave you with is like, where are you noticing patterns that you are naturally just doing without even realizing it? So it's going to take some reflective work. And then where can you inner parent yourself through those patterns so that you can begin to feel safe enough to change them? So in the context of the mom that wanted to give more love and attention because she didn't give enough, her default pattern was more love, more attention is the solution to the problem because it's what she needed, but it's not what her daughter needed. For the parent who defaults to the same patterns of leveraging shame and fear because that's what was done to him to parent his child, it's the same thing. He's just defaulting to a pattern in an unknown context because he feels afraid. Now, you're not articulating all of that in the moment, but that is exactly what your nervous system is telling your body and your brain. So, interrupting patterns and shifting patterns is one of the most important things you can learn to do as a parent, as a human, as a person. It is transformative because that's where we start to see the parts of ourselves that still feel scared, that still don't want to take chances, that still people please, that still struggle to set boundaries, that still look for agreement from everyone else to know that they're okay. We still look for approval. You know, I still have people say to me all the time, I don't know how you do it on social media. I don't know how you show up and just talk to the camera. And it's really interesting to me because it's like, that shouldn't stop you. Like if I didn't do this, oh my gosh, my soul would be empty. Like this is what I'm meant to do. And so of course I was afraid. I'm still afraid when I do different things on here and when I share different parts of myself. But that's the journey. That's the process. I got to walk through that fear. I got to talk to that fear. I got to dance with that fear. I've got to join the fear. I don't walk away from it. I usually have to go toward it. And nobody likes that answer, but that's just the truth. So all this to say is, instead of reparenting, don't necessarily ask for a redo. Look for a way to cultivate your own inner parent. That's the work and that's the stuff that's going to really benefit not just you, but your child and all of your relationships. So I will leave information in the show notes if anybody wants to book a discovery call. I am starting to take calls. I'm starting to book clients for August and September. So again, I do parent coaching if you want it to be more child-centered and we want to talk about how we're parenting our child and also inner parenting work. You can apply for parent coaching there. If you are interested in life coaching, which is more about inner parenting, I have clients who don't even have children that I work with. You can send me an email at albiona@theparentingreframe.com. I'll put that in the show notes as well. And just give me a little bit of insight as to who you are, what you were listening to, and why you're sending me the email. And I would love to connect. So thank you guys for listening, and until next time.